Hello, everyone. We're going to start in just a minute. Get everyone a chance to get online. Okay, good afternoon, and thank you for joining the Utah Cultural Sector Community Update video calls. Now, please note there's closed captioning is available for this call. If you'll access from the bottom of your screen, click on closed captioning and then click on show subtitles. My name is Vicki Pinella Borns, Director of the Utah Division of Arts and Museums. On behalf of the Utah Department of Heritage and Arts, Utah Cultural Alliance, Utah Humanities, Utah Museums Association, local arts agencies throughout the state, and the Utah Division of Arts and Museums, welcome, and we appreciate your participation in these calls. If you've missed a call, they are posted on our website. That's artsandmuseums.utah.gov COVID-19 cultural resources, and you will see that we'll post some of these things in the chat function of this as well. And thank you so much to everyone that submitted questions and topics for these calls. You'll note that if you have any questions during the presentation, please write them in the Q&A section, and we're going to try to answer as many as possible at the end of this call. In Utah, 6,567 cultural-related businesses employ 39,565 people. The arts and cultural sector contributes $6.2 billion to Utah's economy. Our sector had to shut down early as most of our venues serve over 100 patrons, and the cultural sector will likely be the last to reopen. So we serve an important role in Utah's quality of life, economic development, and social impact. Our agency's social impact study has found that museum visitation is correlated with statistically significant increases in health and well-being. And when the Rose Wagner Performing Arts Center opened in Salt Lake City, there was one restaurant on the street. Now there are 5. So during our presentation today, we will hear from Senator Daniel Hemmert, Utah State Senate District 14, who will share information regarding the upcoming special legislative session. Crystal Young Otterstrom, Executive Director of the Utah Cultural Alliance, will provide an update of the cultural community's economic impact survey results. And we will have Wendy Hassan, Executive Director of Cache Valley Center for the Arts, and Felicia Baca, Executive Director of the Salt Lake City Arts Council, will provide an overview of how COVID-19 is affecting their communities. And then finally, we will have a question and answer period at the end of the call. I have just a couple of updates from the Utah Division of Arts and Museums. In collaboration with the Salt Lake City Arts Council, Utah Arts and Museums is providing $500 emergency funding for individual artists statewide. The application and process will be on our website this week. And that's artsandmuseums.utah.
Vicki, it looks like you might have frozen. Would you like to try and call in?
Am I still frozen? Sorry. Am I still frozen? Because I look fine.
Oh, nope, you're not. You look great. You've unfrozen. Go right ahead.
Thank you. Sorry, on my end, it looks like it's going really well. So I appreciate that notice. So again, come visit our website at artsandmuseums.utah.gov for information regarding our emergency artists funding. Also, Arts and Museums and Utah Humanities have been notified respectively by the National Endowment for the Arts and the National Endowment for the Humanities on our appropriations from the COVID-19 Emergency Funding Act. Utah Humanities and Utah Arts and Museums will be collaboratively distributing these funds. We anticipate these will be small grant amounts, and our teams are finalizing the process. So I just want to double check to see if Senator Hemmert has been able to get on the call yet.
Yeah, this is Dan. I just called in. Sorry, I have to do it phone only if that's okay.
Oh, that's totally fine. A quick question. Do you think you'll be able to stay with us for the until 4 o'clock, or do you need to run off?
I'll do whatever you want.
Well,
But it would be real nice. It'd be real nice to go back to work. So.
Okay, okay. Well then, let us share a quick update for our cultural sector, Senator, and then we will turn the time over to you. Crystal Young Otterstrom is the Executive Director of the Utah Cultural Alliance and Utahns for Culture. She's a certified change leader, was named one of Utah Business Magazine's 40 Under 40 in 2013, and is a member of the Americans for the Arts State Arts Advocacy Network Council. Crystal.
Hello, thank you, Vicki. Hi, everybody. I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to share the updates of our COVID survey. Can you see my screen okay? Can someone confirm for me?
Yes, we can. Thanks, Crystal.
Thank you. All right, so this is our survey that we're taking of the cultural sector weekly. So it's continuing to get more difficult and concerning for our sector. So we now have 648 responses and counting. 52.2% of respondents are artists and humanities scholars. 47.2% are some kind of for-profit or nonprofit cultural organization. Of those businesses, 73.3% are nonprofit, 11.8% are for-profit, and another 11.8% are government entities. Of these 648 responses, they employed 9,200 people pre-COVID. That's about 2,200 full-time equivalent and 6,900 part-time and contractors. And so while this is a strong response, 648, we know that this is low reporting, and actual losses in the entire picture are much worse than this. So keep that in mind. Individual creatives have an average of 3.3 months cash reserves on hand. Organizations have an average of 5.23 months cash reserves on hand. We have a pretty good cross-section of organizational size and a fairly great cross-section of businesses serving the state. As you can imagine, with the cultural sector, the impact is extreme on our sector and all those that rely on in-person business, such as restaurants and hospitality and others. The vast majority are seeing a mostly severe, extremely severe, or half severe impact from the coronavirus, and that'll be indicated in the numbers you'll see in a second. 57.7% have seen an increase because of loss of non-admissions income. The loss of non-admissions income of those 648 respondents is 18 million. Loss of admission revenue is 36 million, and the aggregate is $55.5 million. When we look into individual creatives and their impact, the 43.6% of them have seen 5 to 10 events canceled, but they are seeing an increasing number of the higher number of events canceled as the pandemic extends in time. For these individual artists, creatives, and humanities scholars, they do expect this to impact them either a good amount or a moderate amount. They still are looking fairly split into thirds of, do they anticipate having emergency needs? The no is actually increasing slightly as unemployment and pandemic unemployment become more widespread. The impact on jobs is worsening. The number of jobs in jeopardy has lowered since our previous salaries. However, the number of terminated jobs have actually greatly increased. I think that difference is because these jobs are getting terminated, whereas before they were just in jeopardy. So that's 1,662 that have been terminated. And again, this is just of the respondents. We know that the actual number is worse. The cultural sector is adapting. by increasing their online presence, looking at a number of ways of which they can participate. We'd like to point out this 35.13% who've increased their online presence, and then of course reducing their budget in a variety of ways is how a number of these cultural businesses are coping. We're seeing more organizations offer work from home and increased sick policy, or both, as we've taken this survey weekly. We are listing virtual events at nowplanningutah.com/virtual, and we now have 193 virtual events. In the last week, we've added a couple of questions to see how organizations are utilizing the financial relief efforts that are currently available. And as you can see, sadly, 56% haven't utilized any of these. And so I think we need to do some more education on our part as service organizations to let them know what they can qualify for. But on the optimistic side, close to 31% of the respondents have utilized the Paycheck Protection Program loan, 20.4% the EIDL loan or the disaster loan, and then you can see a few more, including one person who took the utilized the Greater Together St. George Area Chamber of Commerce loan. We do expect these numbers to increase as the pandemic increases, and especially the GoEd grant, or not grant, but the GoEd loan program was not available for nonprofits until the application opens today. So I think we'll see more, a higher utilization of that effort. We asked respondents how many of these financial resources have they been approved for, and only 11.7% of those who had said that they had applied for one of these programs have actually been approved. That's concerning, but of course, as we have seen in the news, these programs are very much overrun. We also asked particularly organizations what kind of public health protocols could they implement to perhaps open up their doors sooner than they might otherwise be allowed. And a number of these items that you can receive here are easy for them to implement, like regular disinfecting, making hand sanitizer available, ticket scanning, etc. Programs are easy, except for those who have equity actors as part of their offerings, because equity requires a playbill, a physical playbill. Medium are special hours for the immunocompromised and special seating for the immunocompromised. Temperature taking at entry points was pretty mixed. Some organizations felt like they could cover it and some thought they couldn't. And then of course, difficult is having spacing among audience members. We of course make a number of recommendations to our elected officials to help the cultural sector survive, and many of this is already becoming available. But first and foremost, of course, is significant financial support, either through loans or grants, and making it available as soon as possible. You can always find the most recent version of the survey at utculture.org/COVID-19. We do update it every Friday. So as your situation changes, as you furlough or lay off more employees, as you lose more gigs, please go and take the survey again. You can either go back to your original email confirmation and edit your original entry, or you can take it again, and it's easy for us to dedupe the results. And also on these sites are a number of resources for those in the cultural sector. And then we encourage everybody to use the hashtag #UTCultureFromHome to showcase what you're doing during this time. And with that, thank you so much.
Thank you, Crystal. We appreciate all the time and effort that it takes to produce this survey. Now, it is my honor to welcome and introduce Senator Dan Hemmert on our call today. Senator Hemmert is the Majority Whip of the Utah State Senate, He's also the successful business owner of Red Hangers Cleaners. Senator Hemmert will address issues for the upcoming special session. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me on. And I guess time will tell if we're actually successful here. You know, what's scary about the survey and survey results, that's not just in the arts and humanities industry, it's actually similar type situations that are being seen across the board among, particularly in hardest hit, our small businesses. You know, so I have a retail dry cleaning business that is down 90% from where it was just 5 weeks ago or 6 weeks ago now. And similar to what you've seen, we've had to lay off almost 60% of our workforce and limited hours, and are running at a expense structure that exceeds our current revenue, incoming revenue. And the only reason we're operating is because we did apply for some of these loans and were successful in actually receiving our payroll protection plan loan funding last Friday, which at least lets us know we'll be able to pay our employees who still are here. But it's rough right now for industries across, you know, in a lot of ways. That said, you know, I think we will get through this, and we'll be okay, and it'll be rough for a while. But I do think industries, including the humanities and arts, will come back, and including other small businesses, restaurants, and even dry cleaners will survive, and there'll be something at the end of this if we can make it through it, which I think we will. That said, so for the special session, we're looking at a few things, particularly some of the things we're looking for, or we're looking to do. One of the bills that I'm running is to create a commission that advises the governor to essentially develop a plan to restart the economy. If you've been following the news, and no one wants to be naive or ideological about coronavirus and how dangerous it could be, but if you look at the data, particularly here in Utah, and I'm sure if you're following it, you've noticed the number of cases has been declining, the number of hospitalizations is not increasing, and the ICUs, the intensive care units in the state of Utah, are nowhere near capacity. And as recently as the end of last week, some of the large healthcare network providers or hospital organizations who have their own models on capacity have models that suggest they'll never get to capacity. And remember, the whole intent of the Stay Home, Stay Safe directive is not that no one gets sick. It's that we get sick slow so that we don't overrun our hospitals. And at least right now, it's looking like we're not going to overrun our hospitals. And so one of the things we're trying to do in the session is create this commission that will develop metrics, clear metrics, which is something we've been missing, as to how a business could open. And I'm making stuff up because I wouldn't be doing this, the commission would be doing this. But for example, if you're familiar with restaurants, you may be familiar with food handlers permits. Well, perhaps there's a new permit developed that's a pandemic permit, where they create criteria under which a restaurant could operate even in today's environment, and create a training and a certification program similar to the food handlers permit, where a restaurant, if they send their employees to this training and they conform to the protocols laid out in this training, they could, in theory, be open. Do the same thing with the healthcare industry. So, for example, I know Utah Valley Regional Medical Center. I live in Orem. That's the big hospital down in Utah Valley. It's only operating at 30% capacity. They shut everything down, also not to stop the spread of infection. They shut everything down to protect the stocks of personal protective equipment, or you see the acronym PPE. That's why they shut down the healthcare system, to protect those stocks. Well, where they're not seeing the overload that they were hoping to avoid through the Stay Home, Stay Safe directive, the thought is, well, maybe these hospitals can open back up, and you can start seeing some elective or non-emergent procedures start happening again. And so the bill, again, will ask this commission to create a framework under which that could happen in the hospitals and in the restaurant industry to start. but ultimately to do it at all places. One of the biggest challenges, particularly as it relates to arts and humanities, are not most, but many of the events you do are gatherings, large gatherings. And that's going to be a hard one to work through where the spread of the disease is still so concerning. But hopefully within a month, even that can be relaxed. The more data we have, the easier it will be to make decisions. And all of the decisions we've been making so far are based off of non-data driven kind of worst case scenario projections. And I'm not going to fault anyone for making a decision based on that, but as we get more data, hopefully we can make better informed decisions. And I hope the data proves out that we can relax some of the constraints we put on, the arts and humanities in other industries. But this bill that I'm running is to create this commission to help make clear, quantitative, not qualitative, things that a business or industry could do to operate and to have some of the restrictions placed on them relaxed a little bit. So that's one piece. Other things that I think you'll see this special session is one is a clarification of the fact that the governor, as far as these preemptive rights of the state government over any political subdivision, and political subdivisions would be counties and cities. It's not to change rules that have been put in place or orders like that have been done in Salt Lake County or Salt Lake City, but it is to clarify that ultimately the governor does all the power to do those things, starts with the governor, and that he holds those power and he can delegate it, which he's done in the past, but to really clarify that he has it. So there'll probably be something that does deal with some of those types. Who has the authority to make those types of decisions. It'll also probably say one thing we're looking at is, can a non-elected official or should a non-elected official be able to make decisions to close businesses? And it'll probably say, yes, they can in an emergency like now, but if it's going to continue past a reasonable period of time, then an elected official probably needs to ratify it or extend it. Thought for that is an elected official is held accountable through the voters, whereas an appointed official isn't. And so we thought that power should be vested in those elected officials, and ultimately they should be the ones making those decisions, not unelected officials. So that's another bill that's being looked at. There are some talking about unemployment benefits to try to fill in some of the gaps left in what the federal government did, such as waiving the 1-week waiting period to get money in hands of people who've been furloughed or let go or who can otherwise qualify for unemployment. That's something that's being looked at. And then there's another bill to clarify that the tax deadline for filing in Utah can shift just like the federal government did. So we automatically follow the federal government for personal filings, so that date was moved when the federal government did, but for corporate filings, it requires some legislation to give the tax commission the authority to shift those dates. So that'll be in there. There's also, and this may be something you're more interested in, the federal government has put in place their disaster recovery loans, which, speaking from personal experience, are a bit of black boxes. We applied 2 weeks ago, never heard anything, so no idea. The payroll protection program under the CARES Act, which, again, from personal experience, we applied for and were able to get funded last week, so that's real, and that's helpful. But still, we're concerned with support for businesses, including nonprofits. And so one thing we're looking at is a rent assistance program, because even though the PPP loan allows you to use the money for rent, the way it's structured, there's not much money there for rent. It almost all has to go to payroll. And so one of the things we're looking at the state is some type of rental assistance program where if your revenues are impacted a certain amount, you can apply for and receive a grant for a certain amount of rental assistance. So that as a business or as a nonprofit, if you're leasing or renting facilities, or even if you're buying those facilities, in theory, this could be used for debt service, and you have debt on these facilities, you could get this grant based on your revenue declines that would allow you to not have your physical location be put in jeopardy and have money to fund that. That's one other thing. And then there's another grant that's being looked at that is just a percentage of revenues where you would receive a grant that's equal to a percentage of your typical unaffected business. And I'm not saying it's going to be huge, but we were looking at like 5% of your pre-COVID-19, or if you're a seasonal business, maybe last year's revenue that's just a grant or a forgivable loan even, that would, again, hopefully allow your business to survive. So the challenge we have with giving assistance to businesses, you know, as a small business owner, I'm all for giving the money to businesses and not keeping it in state coffers. But the challenge is we just don't have that much money as a state relative to what the federal government can do, because the federal government can create money and we can't. But we are looking at this federal aid. So the federal government's going to send us $1.2 billion, $400 million of which automatically goes to Salt Lake and Utah counties because it's based on county size, and only those two counties are big enough to qualify. The remainder goes to the state government, and the state's already spent a bunch of that. But of the remainder, we would like to create these grant and business assistance programs to get the money back in businesses. And when I say businesses, just so you know, in my mind, I'm including nonprofits and people in your industry. Just call it non-government entities. And so that's kind of, so far at least, what's been discussed for this special session. I don't think this will be the only special session. What we tried to do is ask ourselves, what's the most critical things that we can do right now, and let's get ourselves into special session as soon as possible and deal with those critical things, knowing that there will be more things as this progresses. Unfortunately, legislatures and legislative government in general was deliberately structured to be slow. And so we're kind of dealing with that structural reality of being a legislative and deliberative body that's by intent was built to not be fast. And so we're doing what we can to be fast, but just recognize there's a reality of the way the process works. So any questions?
Yes, we do have a question. Since Utah and Salt Lake counties are already receiving funds, will these other dollars go to the other counties?
I'm sure that'll be part of it, because the money is meant in a large degree to help with health departments. And so, yes, I don't know the answer to that, because the money isn't, we don't control the money per se as a legislature. It goes to, but I would assume, and the discussions I've heard, the answer is yes, it would be allocated to those other local health departments to a large degree. You know, we would like to keep some of it available to assist businesses, but to a large degree, yes, it'll end up in the other health department's hands.
Okay.
It's just the way the federal law works. It automatically sent it to counties with over 500,000 people.
Sure. Oh, that's very helpful. Thank you so much. I'm looking to see if there's any other additional questions for you, Senator, but I wanted to thank you so much. This has been very helpful, and it's we really appreciate the thoughtfulness that's gone into the actions that you're going to be looking at. And I know many of us are wondering how best to determine when we can resume business, and all the efforts that you're talking about would be very, very helpful for our arts museum and cultural community.
Well, I appreciate that. It's going to be tough. Like, you know, it's going to be tough. I think last I heard there are 170,000 people unemployed in the state of Utah. This is across the board, and that's estimated to get up to 400,000. And I want to say there's only like 1.5 million employed people in the state of Utah to start. So that's pretty horrific unemployment. And I have to assume your industry takes a big brunt of that. You know, similar to other retail organizations that depend on a daily sale or, you know, an event sale just to operate. You can't keep people employed if you don't have any money coming in the door. It's tough.
Exactly. You understand it very well, and we greatly appreciate that, and that you're representing ours as well as the entire state's interests at the legislature. We we so appreciate that you are that you came on today, and hopefully if you have additional time, we'd love to have you come back and tell us what happens from the session as well.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Yep. Bye-bye.
So it is a little bit after 4. And so I wanted to mention that the GoEd Bridge loans are open again today, and nonprofits can apply. So please go to the coronavirus.utah.gov business resources for that. And we're sort of deciding here. What I would like to do is, we have 2 wonderful presenters who are going to talk about what's happening in their communities. And I would like to invite you to stay in the call a little bit longer. So let me, oh, I guess I need to turn my video on, don't I? I totally spaced that out. Sorry about that, everyone. I'd like to give our 2 presenters 5 minutes each to talk about what's happening in their communities. So Felicia Baca is the director of the Salt Lake City Arts Council, acting as the chief arts and culture advocate for the city. She oversees the development, promotion, implementation, support, and strengthening of creative programs and policies. She understands the cultural issues of Utah's capital city. I'd like to ask Felicia if she will turn on her mic and her video and join us.
Hello, I'm here. Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you so much.
Hey, great. Well, Vicki kind of tackled what the Salt Lake City Arts Council does. Our mission is really to promote, present, and support artists and arts organizations. I first wanted to say thank you so much for having me. I think first and foremost, I have just, we've had a lot of dim spots, but I've been so incredibly impressed by the goodwill and creativity from the community and everybody's drive to shift gears, innovate, really keep their teams uplifted and collaborate. This looks different for all of us, but I know that that difficult work is happening, and the arts are essential to our communities. I talked to a few organizations just because we're a grant maker about what they're experiencing, and while there is some unintended benefits to learning to innovate, there's some incredible hardships that organizations are having. So I just wanted to talk about a couple of them briefly. As one of the organizations I talked to calls it, we're all practicing social solidarity. So it's really an incredible time for organizations to have to really pivot in unique ways. So as we mentioned, our sector really relies on gathering in public spaces for ticket-based revenue. Our funding is often contingent upon executing events. So many of our workers in our field have secondary employments in the gig economy or restaurants and the food and beverage services, or even in education. So all those sectors are hit as well. And of course, we think of artists as small businesses. So one organization that I've spoken with is the Plan B Theater Company. They're founded in 1991, and they're one of the only professional theater group in the United States that is producing full seasons of new work by local playwrights. Their work is very intentionally socially conscious and has a mission that's really committed to diversity. And they have a number of outreach programs. One of them is a free elementary school festival that was launched in 2013 among another series of programs. So Plan B resides in the Rose Wagner Performing Arts Center, and they have experienced 2 separate building closures due to the pandemic first, and then the earthquake. So they're in Salt Lake County facilities. They were in the middle of producing a play called The Audacity, which is a play about 3 women that are that lived over 100 years ago in rural Utah. And that play was almost complete on March 12th, but they quickly pivoted to find a resolution, which was a really huge artistic gamble for their company, but decided film the play. So they only had 6 rehearsals for a play and adhered to social distancing measures required. It was a one-woman show and filmed it a week earlier than it would have launched. But the consequences you know, of the closure were certainly felt. There's no ticket-based revenue. In 20 years, this is an organization that's never run a deficit. And so the prospect of this happening was really challenging. They lost their ability to conduct 18 different performances across the state. But there were a couple silver linings. They estimate that about double the audience was able to view the live stream from a typical audience. Original ticket holders were given priority for the premiere, and so then they made a conscious decision to show it after that to the broader public for free. So many people streamed that content outside of geographic barriers that they would have normally had. Another incredible innovation that came from this is that one of the actresses was a illustrator and visual artist, and they're going to be producing a digital children's book with all of their funds, and they'll connect the students in rural areas to that and have actors dress in costume, read the play aloud, and will be providing a video as well. So their future is a little uncertain with their facility closure, but the county's been incredibly supportive of them, and they're planning a number of sort of digital and audio outreach mechanisms. So I just wanted to share a really brief clip of the play. It's a little bit quiet, but so you have a sensibility of kind of what that looks like. And then I'll show you a few other examples.
You about candlelight. He'd say, Josie, I'm bored. Go get one of your daddy's books and read me a story. And when you get a miracle, it's not like you just won a new car, you know? It's like someone took out your eyes.
So I just wanted to show you that really briefly. Another incredible organization that has pivoted quite quickly is SpyHop. They're a digital youth arts media center, and they mentor young people in the arts and empower them to affect positive change in their lives. And this organization, also over 20 years old, is in the middle of a capital campaign and halfway through constructing a new building. So the economic impact of this situation is certainly rattled them. And with the onset of COVID, they've kind of asked themselves the question of what kind of things were in their realm of control. And they decided they're still kids and they are still artists. And so in trying to pivot, they've created a couple of new programs. And one is a brand new one called SpyHop Rewired. It features weekly live digital workshops in song editing, for photo editing for kids, and they'll all share their work. Sorry about that. They'll all share their work with the group at the end. And they're launching another program called Art Shop, which provides on-demand video tutorials for STEAM-based arts projects. So all of this program is offered for free, which can be really hard on these organizations that are no longer bringing in, whether it's ticket-based revenue or attendance for classes. But the goodwill of these organizations to share these models with the community is really high and inspiring. So out of a problem, we've had some creative solutions kind of created, but SpyHop is hoping school will resume in the fall and they can continue their work. And I have one other small video clip of an example that they sent me for some of the work that they're doing.
Now look at your own list and think about what you can use to make those sounds. For my sound effects, here's what I chose to make those. For number 1, the cracking of the back, I chose spaghetti noodles breaking.
So you can kind of briefly see some of the video and web content they're making. I'm over time, but there's a lot of incredible organizations out there. The Tracy Aviary is offering free daily online education activities at 3 p.m. The Hogle Zoo is doing Facebook field trips, which are incredible. And lots of local history museums like the Murray City Museum in Fort Douglas have online digital tours with guides that people can download. So again, a really inspiring community that's creating some really interesting content in really challenging times that we're eager to support during this time. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Felicia. We really appreciate that. And now I'm really happy to introduce Wendy Hassan, is the Executive Director of the Cache Valley Center for the Arts, the local arts agency for Cache County, and management entity for Logan City's historic cultural arts facilities. Normally host to over 50 organizations and 110,000 patrons a year, Cache Arts has a front row seat to the impact of COVID-19 on the arts organizations at the top of Utah. Wendy.
Thank you so much, Vicki. And I want to take a second to address a question that came in about why we think we'll be among the last to open. And one of the reasons for that, at least for our big events, and I believe that the Senator also addressed this, is that big gatherings are more of a problem. So we'll be one of the last to come forward. So wanted to make sure that question got addressed, and to thank you all for hanging in there and taking a second to hear about things up in northern Utah. It's a privilege to be among you. I know that, like many of you, these calls are a lifeline for me. So I'm happy to be here and hear about the amazing things happening other places in the state and connect to resources. So when this all went down, of course, one of the first things we did was to reach out to our Art Summit, a grassroots group that has been very active for more than 10 years now, and gauge their temperature, see how things were going, see what they were doing to adapt, innovate, and thrive. And we are, as has been mentioned, the first that were closed will be some of the last to open. We have a long runway. So Cache Valley Civic Ballet, which was supposed to perform Firebird on March 20th, had of course already invested everything in their show. They had to cancel. It would have taken them at least 2 months to re-ramp up that show, and their lead wouldn't be available, so they just canceled. It's just done. And those losses are some, certainly many of us have felt. We've seen our revenues go to zero overnight from terms of our earned revenue. With nothing on sale, we're bearing the creative and construction costs of all of our canceled shows, the cost of refunds, and the knowledge that we're worried about too is our non-earned income and how that might also be at risk. We fear that foundation giving will go down with the value of underlying investments, that government resources will go down with tax revenues, corporate sponsorships will go down with sales, individual donations will go down with reduced wages, our endowments are also down because, again, if they rely on underlying investments. And then we also hope that once the green light comes, people will have the confidence to come, even when it's been approved. So what are we doing? What are we doing in northern Utah? In the short term, in our urgent phase, we're utilizing the campaign many of you have also seen in the state to keep COVID-19 from stealing the show by donating instead of refunding, buying a gift certificate, volunteering remotely, buying art online, taking a virtual art class. The Kane College of the Arts has actually established an emergency fund for students, and many students have been particularly hit by this crisis. They are members of the gig economy, their summer contracts have evaporated, their gigs are gone, many of them also work in the restaurant industry. We all joke, there's a particular restaurant in town that half the theater department works at, and we look forward to seeing them there. That also has been disrupted. We're leveraging the time apart by organizing, by strategizing, by working on future programming, maintaining our facilities, anything to keep people productively on the payroll. And as long as we can keep people doing stuff, as long as we're allowed to come to work, we will. And I know in northern Utah, we've had fewer cases, so we have a little more flexibility there than some other places in the state. We have a program called ArtCore that has been delivering art supplies to families in need and creating Facebook pages to display artwork that's been made at home. The Nora Eccles Harrison Museum of Art has taken the technology used to give you virtual tours of homes to do a virtual museum tour. And it's beautiful, it's stunning, and a great way to engage with the museum when you can't go in person. They've also organized sculpture walks of the public art on campus that people can do on their own time in a non-guided way safely. We're reaching out to social media, as many of you are, to stay in the public awareness through daily art activities, organizational profiles. We've had local ceramicists display how to do a hand-built art clay project. Dance studios have posted videos, choreographers have posted their choreography. Some of our organizations have actually turned their skills to support other sectors of the economy. Lyric Rep, which has a major impact on our summer tourism season, is profiling a different business every week on their website, staying in touch with their patrons and helping to keep the business's awareness alive. It's a lovely cross-pollination of ideas. As a community, we're supporting the takeout from restaurants, quarantine cuisine. Call it in, pick it up, take it home. There's a USU student who works in the costume shop who developed, or she's creating attachments you can put on masks so they don't pinch your ears. And she's making a good revenue doing that. So sometimes we can adapt in that way. But online content is super crowded. It flies in the face of our value-added proposition of local human live connection. Most of all, this pivoting does not have a revenue stream that supports local artists, as Felicia mentioned. So, like many other artists, author, graphic designer, and gratitude enthusiast, Lorie Maewyn is shifting to her online sales, formerly a small part of her business, and now she's focusing on greeting card sales. It's a rough time to enter that market. Not a local example, but Brunwyn Malden from the LA County Department of Arts and Culture has enlisted her students in compiling a list of paid online events and activities from local artists, arts nonprofits, and small arts businesses, and sharing it with their networks using their research skills to support the local arts ecology. Now, the brightest spots we are finding are in feeding the hunger to connect, even if it is virtual. We've reached out individually to our nearly 200 volunteer ushers, most of whom are in the high-risk category, and they have been so positive and generous in their replies. They've volunteered to get groceries or run errands for each other. As organizations, we are exploring what is truly important. It's a great time to jettison programs that have outlived their value. It's also a great time to find opportunities for collaboration and support across our ecosystem. Old rivalries and grudges are evaporating in the light of our shared struggle. So there are some bright spots. We don't have the answers. We don't know yet how to monetize the virtual work we're doing, but we are building relationships that I think will extend and make us stronger as we emerge.
Thank you so much, Wendy and Felicia. These were such gratifying examples of how our arts and museum and cultural community are pivoting and doing what they can to continue to engage. So I really appreciate you taking the time and joining with us today. Thank you, thank you. Please note just a couple of things. There's still funding available through the Small Business Administration loans, and they are taking applications. While we have heard of some difficulties with the application process, things are improving, and it's important that you are diligent in order to access these resources. Also, independent contractors are now eligible for the SBA loans. Also, thank you so much for supporting Now Playing Utah in hosting arts and culture virtual events. I'm sending that link to all of my family as often as I can. So, recently, Utah Arts and Museums received a lovely message from Victoria Lyons at Bad Dog Arts, an arts education organization. And she shared, one of the big things that we have taught children and teens through the years is all about creative problem solving skills. Now we get to test out those skills for ourselves. Our mantra has been imagine, dare, create. We are being tested on a daily basis to imagine how to do things differently, dare to take risks and try something new, to create new structures and ways of operating. COVID-19 has and will continue to force us to re-examine how we do business, how we serve our community. We are talking about lasting changes, and this is an opportunity, as we have heard others mention, to focus on our priorities. So thank you for your courage and determination as we deal with COVID-19. Take care, breathe, and stay well. Bye now. We hope to see you next week.